What's cracking, y'all? You are now watching Boo TV. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and let's get into the topic for today. What's cracking, y'all? Here to talk about Stevie Francis, aka Stevie Franchise, aka the franchise baby. A point guard, a prime point guard in the 2000s era of basketball, who would be absolutely stellar in today's NBA. And he was great back then with the slower pace and the defense and the different rules and the lack of three-point shooting. He was an all-star point guard then. Now, not too long ago, might have been a while ago, time is flying, I did a video on Stevie Francis and Baron Davis about how they would be extremely effective and even better than they were in their era if they played in today's era. And I stand by that. Francis was phenomenal. Again, another all-star point guard that has been forgotten as time has moved on. He was short, hyper athletic, had a crazy vertical, stocky, strong, quick, a supreme handle on the basketball. Some of the best handles I've seen from an NBA player. And because of his athleticism and his strength, he could finish at the cup, dunk on people, either hand, either foot, had the mid-range, and had the long ball. Francis used to give me nightmares on those Houston Rockets. As a Laker fan, especially when they got Yao Ming, I'll be lying to you. I was like, man, it's going to be a problem. He was already, we already couldn't stay in front of him. Now him, Cuttino Mobley, and Yao Ming, woo. I was worried about those Rockets, but we all knew how that shaked out. The trade happened. Francis and Cuttino Mobley go to the Orlando Magic. T-Mac heads over to Houston. In the long run, didn't work out for either teams, but there we were. Francis was a beast, man. I'm telling you. And today's NBA, kidding me? Now he can get up more three-point shots. His three-point shot would be even better now that the volume and now that they're practicing it more. But Stevie Francis was basically, to some degree, when you look at the scoring, the position, the size, the athleticism, he was basically Russell Westbrook before Russell Westbrook. Wasn't the rebounder Russ was, and not quite the facilitator Russ was, but you kind of see where I'm kind of drawing the parallels at. Stevie was that guy. And we've got a video here. What happened to Stevie Francis? I don't really know all the details. I know he got in some trouble either near the end of his career or after his playing career was over. I can't quite remember. My memory's foggy. Anyway, let's get into it. See what Francis has to say.
First time I masked pain with alcohol was when I got benched by Rick Adam, and I came back to Houston to play. And I sat on the bench. In Houston. I sat on the bench. And I'm looking like, damn. So this is what the end is going to look like for me. So I wouldn't say I just automatically started drinking. I started living my life the way that I wanted to, as far as that little kid that had all that suppression while he was on the NBA basketball still had to play by those jail rules.
It's not easy to make it in the NBA. There are millions of kids all around the world who dream of running out of that tunnel to 18,000 screaming fans in a packed arena. The reality is that almost all those kids who dream of going to the league don't even come close to playing 1 minute on the NBA floor. That's what makes this story so fascinating to me, as this has to be one of the most improbable players to have ever been drafted into the NBA, let alone a top 3 pick. Today's video is about Steve Francis, an electric point guard who came into the league in the early 2000s. He was such a polarizing player at the time, how quick it all ended is almost surreal. To everyone watching, welcome back to the channel. I appreciate all the love and support I've been getting. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to follow all of my social media accounts as well. Those links will be in the description. But other than that, get comfortable because this is going to be a good one. This is what happened to Steve Francis. Stephen Deshaun Francis was born February 21st, 1977 in Tacoma Park, Maryland. As a kid, he was given the nickname Wink. I tried my best to do research of why he got the nickname, but I never could find anything. Steve's upbringing was really rough. His father served 20 years in a federal prison while he was growing up because of a bank robbery. When he was young, Steve lived in a 3-bedroom apartment with 18 different people. The way Steve described his environment growing up was pretty horrible. I grew up in DC in the 80s during the crack epidemic. Don't ever call it a crack era, it was an epidemic. Crack devastated our entire community. It was like a plague, man. I watched it, I lived it, I sold it. My very first memory in life is visiting my father in the federal pen on a cookout day and having a police officer take me and my mother into a little holding room. They strip searched both of us. I was like 3 years old. Didn't matter, pull his pants down. Steve was living off of food stamps trying to make ends meet. He eventually started to work with drug dealers, being brought on as a phone boy. His job at the time was to answer the phone for customers who wanted to buy drugs, and he would tell the customers where to meet the dealers. While waiting on calls, Steve would pass the time by shooting a basketball inside of a phone booth. Him and his friend ripped the roof off of the top of the phone booth, creating an opening, imitating a hoop. Steve got to high school. He wanted to play on the basketball team, but the coaches wanted him to play JV due to his size. He ended up walking off the court. Steve only played in 2 high school games. They weren't even varsity level games. Steve would end up joining an AAU team, but we all know AAU basketball doesn't give you the same exposure, especially during the time when the Peach Jam and the showcases weren't even thought of yet. Steve would end up eventually dropping out of high school altogether. Problem wasn't that he couldn't do his work or he wasn't smart enough. Steve just had zero stability growing up, absolutely none. He went to 6 different high schools during his high school career. He described his life like growing up inside of a popcorn machine. He had been robbed at gunpoint a bunch of times. He had gotten beaten and jumped several times. He'd seen drive-by shootings. Steve wasn't even trying to be the best version of himself. This kid was just trying to survive. The scariest thing was the drugs, the needles, man, the pipes, the PCP, the people slumped over that had that look in their eyes. It was everywhere. These are regular people, nurses, teachers, mailmen, the mayor of DC. Things would only get worse for Stevie. When he turned 18, Steve's mother died of cancer, and once that happened, Steve's life seriously took a turn for the worst. When I was 18, my mother died of cancer, and it was a wrap for me. I was done. Any hope that I had, forget it. I quit basketball completely, quit my AAU team, quit playing at the park. I dropped out of high school, and my drug dealing went to a whole nother level. In my mind, I was just going to build a little empire until I got shot or I got jammed up. That was it. Even when Steve's mindset shifted from making it out to embracing the street life, something that his AAU coach told him during his AAU days stuck with him. I'm telling you how it's going to go, Steve. 10 years from now, you're going to see the same guys on these same corners doing the same shit, and they're going to be wearing the newest Fila's, the newest Jordans, looking fresh. But you're going to look at them, and they're going to be another year older, and they're going to be another year older, still doing the same shit, still getting robbed every single day. You could do something different. That quote would run on repeat over and over again in Stevie's mind. Every time he would make a play, every time he would see somebody get mugged, every time he would hear a gunshot ring in the air.
Well, pause. I got a thought, man. That reminds me. It's so true. Usually they get it. If you gotta get out. Most people don't get out. They stay stuck in that lifestyle. I remember, and this doesn't have to necessarily do with drugs that I know of, but I graduated high school in 2005. I left to college and left to the military. I really hadn't been home ever since I left high school, to be honest. But I remember just maybe 3-4 years ago, I went back home and I saw somebody from high school, like 15 plus years ago. And I was like, hey, man, you remember me? Hey, what's up? Saw him outside of a gas station. Might have been racetrack. I was like, hey, man, what's up? What's new with you? What's new? It's been 15 years. What's new? I got so much to tell. And he's sitting there twisting his dreadlocks. I asked him, what's new after 15 years? All he had to say was, I got my hair dreaded up. I'm like, really? That is all you have to tell me? You got your hair dreaded. Listen, for all I know, this guy could have been high as hell on whatever, but still, I'm like, But I see that from a lot of areas like that, in a lot of small towns where there's nothing going for people. You really got to find your way out of it, claw your way out of it, and you really have to pursue something for yourself, whatever it is, whatever you want to do. I don't give a damn what it is, whatever makes you happy, whatever goals you have. But you know, you're gonna be certain places, certain areas, certain environments, man. You get trapped in them, and it's on you to get the hell out. Because especially if you ain't got the guidance, ain't nobody gonna be there to show you the way or be a guiding figure. I get it, man. These guys, they be on the corners, they be in the streets, and it gets ingrained in them, and they don't know nothing else, and they're scared to even go try something else. All right, sorry I rambled on too long. Let's keep going.
He knew he could be doing something different. He just needed the opportunity. For 2 years, Steve did not pick up a basketball, but somehow an opportunity came for Steve. Not the most glamorous opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless. He received an opportunity to join the San Jacinto College, a junior basketball program located in Texas. One of the coaches of the school watched Steve play in the AAU tournament, and after learning about his situation, he reached out to the young kid, offering him a roster spot. Steve was reluctant at first, but after being convinced by his grandmother, he got his GED, hopped on a plane, and at that point, his life would change forever. He would end up leading San Jacinto to an undefeated record and a berth in the National Junior College Tournament. After a successful season at San Jacinto, he would transfer to Allegheny, another junior college, this time in his home state of Maryland. He would do the same thing he did at San Jacinto. He led them to an undefeated season and a berth in the National Junior College Tournament. I feel the best way to describe Steve Francis' game can be summed up by a conversation he had with John Thompson when he almost decided to go to Georgetown for his junior year. "Steve, we like you. We do. But I just had Allen Iverson. I can't have you after Allen. I just can't have it, Steve. I'll have a heart attack." Steve Francis was unpredictable on the court. You didn't know what he was going to do out there. There were probably some times he didn't even know what he was going to do. Whenever he got going, it was literally a show. He was the best in transition. He would use his speed to get to the rim, sometimes at will. Steve was so highly regarded that if he would have entered the NBA draft straight out of JUCO, he would have been still thought of as a first-round talent. Steve decided to join the Maryland Terrapins, making them the must-watch team for that upcoming year. They were ranked 5th in the preseason polls, and they would have a successful season finishing 2nd in their conference. Steve was named All-ACC First Team while averaging 17 points a game.
Yeah, I lived in Maryland for about 10 years, DMV area, Maryland, and at our Buffalo Wild Wings, we had the Stevie Francis Maryland jersey hanging up. I think it was signed, too.
Game on solid efficiency. Maryland would end the year going 28-6 and losing the Sweet 16 to St. John's. Steve loved his time in Maryland and wanted to come back, but he was projected to be a top 3 pick, at worst no later than 5. He had to leave. During the pre-draft process, Steve met with the Bulls, who held the first pick, and the Hornets, who held the 3rd pick. The one team he did not meet with, though, was Vancouver. He said the reason why was because of the distance from Maryland, along with the higher taxes and the lack of endorsement opportunities. Even though he was very vocal about not wanting to be drafted by the team, Vancouver selected him anyways in hopes that they can convince him to join the team. You could see on his face during the draft, though, he was not going. He was pissed. Long story short, he didn't end up playing for Vancouver, and instead, the largest trade in NBA history occurred, with 11 players and multiple picks being moved around. After all the shuffling, Steve would end up in Houston, joining Olajuwon and Barkley. In hindsight, looking back, Vancouver should have just picked another player. There was plenty of talent on the board. Anyways, though, Steve would have a solid rookie year despite the drama and earn a share of the Rookie of the Year honors with Elton Brand. His team, however, would miss Barkley and Hakeem for majority of the year, and the team would end up going 34-48, missing the playoffs. That year is actually where he earned the nickname Stevie Franchise, because Houston fans thought that he would be teaming up with the 2 Hall of Famers, but instead he had to carry the majority of the load from the beginning. When you look at his stats, he did a little bit of everything for Houston. He averaged 18, 6, and 5 on good efficiency. He was the clear best player on the team, and Houston would attempt to build around their talented young star. Houston would improve their record the following season, going 45-37. Their offensive rating jumped from 13th in the league to 5th best. Even though they improved on their record, they still missed the playoffs in a stacked Western Conference that season. Stevie's numbers would improve his second season, but in his third year in the league, he would prove himself to be an elite level player, being voted an all-star starter that year by fans. Steve's play style was flashy but effective. He was a streaky shooter, but when he got hot, there was literally nothing you could do with this guy. Steve's true gift was his first step and explosive leaping ability. While going back and looking at his highlights and doing research for this video, the player that he kind of reminded me of a little bit was Dame. Dame is a much more consistent shooter than Stevie would ever be, but whenever I see Dame decide to attack a defender one-on-one, the way that he can blow by a defender is similar to the way that Steve Francis would blow by his defender. They are well-built guards with strength to absorb contact whenever they attack the basket. Even though he was selected an all-star starter, injuries ended Steve's season. He suffered from both a foot injury and recurring migraines. With Steve missing a lot of time, the team regressed to a record of 28-54, putting them in the lottery. This wouldn't be the worst thing that happened in the franchise because they would end up winning the lottery, and that year's prize was a 7'6" alien named Yao Ming. The Steve and Yao duo was a joy to watch on the floor. They complemented their games nicely, and both players were named all-star starters that year. The most notable game that year was a game on a Friday night, January 27, 2003. This game would be against the defending champion Lakers. The game was hyped up with it being Shaq's first time meeting up with the 7'6" giant, the two freaks of the NBA battling for 48 minutes. Even though that was built to be the big attraction for the casual NBA fan, they ended up witnessing one of the most electric performances ever put on by a guard in this league. Steve Francis would play 48 minutes, score 44 points, dish out 11 assists, grab 6 rebounds along with 2 steals, while shooting 12 for 21 from the field, along with shooting 6 from 8 for 3, and going to the free throw line 17 times, converting on 14 of them in an overtime win. Later on during the 03 season, however, head coach Rudy Tomjanovich would step down, and Jeff Van Gundy would be hired as his replacement. The team would miss the playoffs at the end of the 03 season, but would bounce back and make it to the playoffs in the 04 season. They would, however, end up losing in the first round to the Lakers in 5 games. Stevie's numbers started to decline once Jeff got the job. Jeff's philosophy on offense was for it to run around their giant big man rather than their streaky guard. Steve was most effective with the ball in his hands, though, and there was a clear disconnect between player and coach. The team ended up trading him to Orlando in a deal that involved multiple players, with the headline player Houston receiving back in the trade being Tracy McGrady. Steve was hurt by the trade. He loved the city of Houston and wanted to play his entire career there. But the NBA is a business, and the Rockets thought that they had a better chance at winning with T-Mac rather than Stevie. Once Steve got to Orlando, he wouldn't be playing with scrubs. He had another top prospect big man on his team now in Dwight Howard, and his stats jumped back to the numbers you were used to him producing back when he was with the Rockets. Orlando started the season strong, but towards the end, the young team would start to slump and miss the playoffs entirely. The next season wouldn't get much better with the squad. They would struggle to win games with this group. It all began to fall apart on January 11, 2006, when in a blowout loss against Seattle, Steve refused to re-enter the game in the final minutes when head coach Brian Hill told him to check in. He was suspended for 2 games for conduct detrimental to the team, and he was once again in trade talks. He was eventually traded before the NBA trade deadline that season to the New York Knicks. The Knicks were hopeful that the former All-Star would be able to mesh with their star guard Stephon Marbury. Stevie wasn't the same player as he was in Houston, though. He started to suffer from tendonitis in his right knee, which robbed him of his athleticism that made him...
I forgot that he went to the Knicks. I legitimately forgot that.
So special. At the conclusion of the 07 season during draft night, Steve was traded again, this time to the Portland Trail Blazers. Portland bought him out of his contract, making him a free agent. On July 20th, Stevie decided he wanted to go back home, so he decided to reunite with the team that he had the most success with, the Rockets, despite receiving offers from other contending teams around the league who thought that he would be a solid backup point guard. That season would be ruined by, you guessed it, injuries. He would only appear in 10 games that season before undergoing season-ending surgery on his quadricep tendon. Steve would work as hard as he could to return to the court, but by the time the rehab process was over, it was too late. The Rockets traded Steve to the team that drafted him into the league, the Grizzlies. The Rockets decided to trade Steve in order to drop under the luxury tax. Steve would not play for Memphis. He was way before he could even step foot in the city. And just like that, at age 32, Steve was out of the league. It took me damn near 4 years to really accept that I wasn't going to play ball anymore. Basketball has saved this dude's life. He poured his heart and soul into this sport. He gave everything he had, and just like that, 9 years in, it was already over for Stevie franchise. From the time my mother passed away when I was 18 to the time I left the NBA, I never let my guard down. Not one single minute. I was like a soldier at war. I never exhaled. When the end came, it was almost like I was signing off like, well, that was a good run. He poured all the pain he had experienced in life into this game. Like he said, it would take him a while to accept that his career was over, so he signed with the Beijing Ducks in an attempt to make it back to the league, but he only played 4 games there before he was on his way back to the United States. After Steve decided to retire from the game of basketball, tragedy would strike his life again with his stepfather passing away, causing Steve to go to an even darker place. He started to drink heavily, which eventually led him to getting into legal trouble. And November 20...
I knew it was something. I said he got in some kind of trouble post-career. I knew it was something.
2016, Steve was being charged with driving under the influence and threatening a public servant after being arrested in Houston. Following that incident, Steve was then issued a warrant for his arrest on a burglary charge in Manatee County, Florida. Reports said that Steve asked a bartender at the Cortez Clam Factory for a flashlight on the night of June 15th. He was then accused of ransacking a BMW parked outside of the restaurant and took jewelry, makeup, and cash from the car. Reports vary in saying how much value the belongings had. It was between either $1,000 to $7,000 worth of stuff. Stevie, 2 days later, probably feeling guilty from the incident, later came to the police station with a clear plastic bag full of goods and said, "I just robbed somebody, take me to jail, I'm turning myself in." The police officers at the time must have respected Steve's honesty because he then left the station without being charged. He was ultimately never sent to jail and was instead sentenced to 50 hours of community service and a fine of $7,300. Today, Steve is very open about his difficult upbringing and is attempting to share his story with the world to help inspire someone to make it out of the streets. "I went through a lot, but was able to persevere and go to college, become a dad, and become a leader in my community in Houston. I want to show all angles of my life and also tell stories to people that I've encountered along the way growing up in Washington, D.C. who didn't have the platform that I have." Today, Steve is an investor and owner of a team in the basketball league, a minor professional league that has been growing every year. He has also gotten involved in many other projects such as construction companies, boxing promotions, a barbershop, clothing lines, and even a hip-hop record label. Steve Francis made it against literally every odd imaginable. Despite the short-lived career, during his prime, there was not a more fun player to watch when he got going in the Stevie franchise. That's the end of the video. I appreciate everyone who made it this far. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about Steve Francis? Is he a legend of the game, or is he a talented player who didn't live up to his expectations? Also, let me know any other players who would like me to make a video on. It's your boy Seth, and I'm out. Peace.
Incredible story. I'm definitely glad Francis got his life together and is doing good things, doing big things, doing meaningful things, and living a life that his parents and him can be proud of. So definitely happy about that. So they mentioned that the Grizzlies, I keep forgetting they were in Vancouver back in the day, picked him with the number 2 pick, but obviously he didn't want to play there, so that big trade happened. Apparently the biggest trade in NBA history. I don't know if that still stands today or if he was talking at the time, but there were enough other good players in there that he said the Grizzlies should just pick somebody else instead of Francis. So I brought up the draft. That was the 1999 NBA draft. So Elton Brand was picked 1. Francis was 2. Baron Davis was 3. Like, Baron Davis and Stevie Francis have a lot of similarities. Like, BD would have been a great pick. Lamar Odom was number 4. LO would have been a good pick. Jonathan Bender at 5. And Wally Zerbiak and Richard Hamilton would have been a solid pick at 7. Andre Miller, solid point guard. I'm going to have to do a video on Andre Miller. Low-key, super underrated. He was a highly intelligent basketball player. Sean Marion wouldn't have been bad. Jason Terry. I don't even know how to pronounce the 11th and 12th pick. Some guy from Yugoslavia and a guy from Duke. Corey Maggette would have been solid. He was available. Ron Artest was picked at number 16. Wow. James Posey, Jeff Foster, Devin George, Lakers, of course. AK-47, Andre Karolinko was available. Number 24, Jermaine Jones. I liked him. Definitely not on Stevie Francis level, though. And a bunch of people I don't recognize so much. Oh, my boy Wang Juju was in that draft class. Yep, Dallas Mavericks. I think he also played with the Milwaukee Bucks later on. Wang Juju from China. LaRon Prophet, I remember him. Gordon Giricek was a pretty solid player from Croatia. He was number 40. Todd McCullough. And Manu Ginobili. Manu Ginobili picked number 57. Can you believe it? Oh, man. Probably, just individual talent-wise, arguably, maybe the best player in that draft was Manu Ginobili. The thing about Manu is that he never got to play an extended career as an all-star caliber player, which he was capable of. But you know how Popovich had him in that six-man role. Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. Stevie Francis, man. Hell of a player, hell of a player, hell of a player, hell of a player. Hell of a player. Often forgotten, man. Now, I don't hear anybody ever talk about Francis and BD anymore. You know, I'm not a big fan of a lot of these basketball podcasts done by players, just for the fact that they're all yes men. They don't really challenge these players and give them difficult questions and real questions. They just kind of agree with everything, which I'm not a fan of that type of entertainment, you know. So, but it's good to see these guys come in and at least tell their story, at least, you know what I mean? Anyway, y'all let me know what you think about it. Give me everything you got about Stevie Francis. And I appreciate y'all for stepping in. I made a comment that he wasn't, I don't know if I say he wasn't much of a rebounder or as good as a rebounder as Russ. He wasn't as good, but given Francis his size and the era of the NBA that he played in, his rebounding was more than sufficient now that I think about it. I have to throw that out there. All right, we out, baby.